Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Unique Items. Today we're going to be looking at the item Nightwing's Veil. Nightwing's Veil is a relatively amazing item for sorceresses, and quite honestly, one of the best items that a cold sorceress can use on their head. Granted, you could also go with an item that has faster cast, which is unfortunately a downside of Nightwing's Veil, but because cold mastery does not actually increase the damage of the cold skills, this actually becomes a very powerful item for cold characters, because cold mastery, of course, as you know, reduces the resistance of the monster, not increases the damage. And so cold mastery, cold skill damage can actually be very powerful to a cold skill sorceress, whereas similarly, if you had the same amount of like fire skill damage or lightning skill damage, wouldn't be as useful, because you could simply do plus to skills, which would of course bring up your fire mastery or lightning mastery, which would also give you a similar effect. So keeping that in mind, let's go forward. So right off the bat, we have a defense of 352, which is relatively high, and that is the top end for this item. It does go as low as 303. We have a strength requirement of 96, and that is due to the requirement or the negative requirements, which we'll talk about later. We also have a level requirement of level 67, which is relatively mid-tier for such a nice item. We have +2 to all skills on this, which does not vary, which is very nice. And we have a cold damage skill damage, which does vary between 8 to 15%, a rather large variance there. You're talking about 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So it's a variance of what, 5, 6, 7, so 7% variance on the skill damage, which can have a pretty huge effect on the amount of damage that your skills are. Here we have Max Frost Nova, because I was playing around with Frost Nova in the PTR. And as you can see, it's 851 to 966, and when I take off Nightwing Veil, it goes down to 680 to 775. This is kind of how things work. So, like if you're running some interesting abilities, like for instance, let's say you're running Blizzard, and when you put on Nightwing's Veil, you'll notice a huge damage bonus from not only the plus to skills, but also the plus skill cold damage is also calculated in there as well, which is freaking awesome. We have an enhanced defense on this of 90 to 120%. That's where the variance on the defense comes from. And we also have a +20 dexterity, which varies by 10 points, so 10 to 20. This is nice if you want to build a block sorceress. Not a lot of people do build block sorceresses, but those people that do build block sorceresses would definitely like to have the additional 20 dexterity. If you're not a block shield sorceress, then this is a stat that really doesn't mean a lot to you. The only thing that this is going to do is give you a little bit of extra defense. We also have a cold absorb on this bad girl of 5 to 9 cold absorb, which means that it is going to completely negate 9 damage and then heal you for the same amount. So if any cold damage comes in, if it's say 100 cold damage, it's going to reduce it down to 91. You're going to take 91 damage, and then it's going to heal you for 9 damage as well, which is very nice. We also have half freeze duration on this, which hopefully by level 67 you're running some form of cannot be frozen, so not really a big deal. And then negative 50% requirements, which is imperative because Spired Helms have a ridiculous strength requirement. This can also be found in the ethereal form, which has a defense of 523. And before you cry, keep in mind that the Act 3 mercenaries are all getting buffed, and if you did want to put this on an Act 3 cold merc, you would get quite a nice boost out of him from this. I actually use a Nightwing's Veil on my Act 3 cold mercenary to great effect, and I even socketed it with a perfect amethyst so that he could equip other equipment, and I do intend to, when he gets a little higher level, to swap that out for a cold facet, because I really want to rock that really awesome cold merc. Now, if you did find one of these and you wanted to use it on your cold sorceress anyway, you would have to put a Zodron in it, and that's the unfortunate side effect of this. And this also means that you would not be able to put something else in it, which may be of greater value. So you would have to Zod it to make sure that it doesn't break. Now, granted, you can socket this with something nice for your sorceress. So, like I said, you could put a cold facet in here. That's a very good choice. It would also increase this cold skill damage, and it would also decrease the negative resistance. Now, it's also important to note that you really don't have to go above negative 200% on cold resistance. Because how it works is when you have a monster who has, say, 99% cold resistance, which is not uncommon because a lot of monsters in the game are very cold resistant. Negative 200 is the highest percentage that you would ever possibly need because you can't break cold immunities. So negative 200 brings them down to negative 100%, which is the lowest that you can possibly go. So they're at 100. The first negative 100 brings them down to 0, and then the second negative 100 brings them down to negative 100, which increases your damage 2 times. So when you're talking about cold mastery, you want to make sure that you're not beefing it up higher than the negative amount that you need. So, if you, for instance, are a cold sorceress who's running Nightwing's Veil with multiple facets, you're going to take your negative resistance on your facets into account as you calculate out how much cold mastery you need. So keep that in mind. Now, Nightwing's Veil is a relatively rare item, and I would like to take you over to Silo's Pen, and let's take a look and see where we can find this item. So here we are on a Silo's Pen, and we're going to go to Unique Item Nightwing's Veil, and there we go. And we're going to make sure we're looking at all, and we're going to look at bosses first, and we're going to pretend we have about 150% magic find, which is a fairly decent amount. And it looks like we have a really small list here. So we're looking at, we're going to ignore the quest flags, and we're going to say Bale and Diablo in Hell difficulty are your best bet there for 3,044 and 4,333 chance. Neelathak is probably the next best at 1 in 23,161, and everything else isn't even really worth mentioning. Those numbers are crazy. But you can get them from the ranked defilers and whatnot in Worldstone Keep. So, I mean, if you see the defilers, maybe just kill them real quick. They're not that hard to kill. Let's take a look at Super Uniques, and let's see what kind of monsters Super Uniques can drop this item. So we're looking at Neelathak, Frozenstein, Pendleskin, all pretty terrible percent chances, but it's possible. Snapchip Chatter, Thresh Socket, Sharptooth Slayer, Doc Farron. The irony is not lost on me that this item drops from Cold Immune. Sorry, Cold Immune right there, Cold Immune. I'm looking at quite a few of these are Cold Immune. It makes me kind of laugh because obviously this is a Cold Sorcerer's Helmet, and you really would like to have this. You know what I mean? So let's take a look at regular zones, and according to this, we're looking at some pretty terrible probability on most of this stuff, but Worldstone Keep level 3 and 1 are prominent here. Throne of Destruction is very prominent here. I'm seeing the Ancient's Way quite a bit here, which is not bad. A lot of the very odd zones, like Maggot Lair level 3 and 1, Infernal Pit, Icy Cellar, Halls of Vaught. All these are like really kind of like out of the way zones. Flayer Dungeon level 3. I don't think most people are going to be farming there. I've seen a lot of cold zones too, like Fall Viper Temple, Crystalline Passage. A lot of these higher level cold zones that you're probably not going to farm in as a cold sorceress. Interesting. So let's also talk about for a minute who can utilize this item. So not just sorceresses. Sorceresses are not the only ones that can utilize this item. Like I said earlier, you can put it on an Act 3 Merc. Those are actually pretty good. This is actually surprisingly good on a Freezing Arrow Amazon. So if you're a Freezing Arrow Amazon, I would definitely play around with it. It could be your best in slot item. You could also theoretically put this on a Holy Freeze Paladin to great effect, and even if you are a Hurricane Druid, this would be a relatively nice one for you because Hurricane is a cold effect. And maybe if you're going to use the new Arctic Blast, this would be a good one to use for the new Arctic Blast. Just in general, when you're looking at things like this, cold skill damage applies to any character that puts it on. It's rather generic. It applies +2 to all skills as opposed to +2 to like Sorceress or Paladin or anything like that. And the defense on it is relatively high with a huge negative requirement, which honestly means that anybody could theoretically put this helmet on, which is absolutely great. Obviously, it is pointed directly at cold skill characters, and there is also another issue here that maybe you are dual spec'd into multiple elements, and maybe you don't specifically want to beef up your cold side of your dual spec. Maybe you'd rather go with fire, or maybe you would go with lightning, in which case you could do Griffin's Eye Diadem, or you could do the new Flickering Flame Rune Word, both of which are fairly nice for those alternate specs. But the very interesting thing about this is it does have +2 to all skills, whereas something like Flickering Flame is only +3 to fire skills, so keep that in mind. A very nice helmet all around, and if you find one even in ethereal form, I would hold on to it because the mercenaries, the new Act 3 mercenaries, can get a good use out of them. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when we have 3 Nightwing Veils in our inventory. And as always, keep watching.